Welcome to the Football Film Room Show. I'm Nick Kehoe, and we've got another great episode for you today. We finally have some action for the first time since the NFL draft. We've got trades galore. A.J. Brown going to the Patriots. Myles Garrett going to the Rams. Aaron Donald is now thinking about coming out of retirement and rejoining the Rams because he sees how good they look on paper. So we'll get into all that. We're going to do a bit of a deep dive on Cam Ward, his rookie season, what the Titans' outlook is for the 2026 season. But before we do any of that, I want to go into the biggest news of the week, and that is certainly that Myles Garrett trade. Now, we thought it was going to be A.J. Brown going to the Patriots, even though that was somewhat of a foregone conclusion and had been really for, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months or so? So we thought that was going to be the biggest news of the day, but, man, the Rams trading for Myles Garrett. That is the biggest move of this offseason, hands down. And I'll be honest, Les Snead, this Rams club, they've got me on a bit of a roller coaster this offseason. Back in March, I was singing their praises, talking about how I love the fact that they were going all in. They recognized they were in a Super Bowl window, and instead of being a bunch of idiots like the Packers were in 2020 and drafting for the future instead of pounding down the door to get into the Super Bowl, they went out and made a big trade for Trent McDuffie to address the number one hole in their team, the cornerback position. Then they immediately signed Jalen Watson. So instantly they went from their biggest weakness on defense becoming a strength. And then he got into the draft and you thought, okay, man, they've got that 13th overall pick. What cool stuff are they going to do with that? They're going to go draft a receiver, maybe a freak talent like Kenyon Sadiq, tight end out of Oregon. The question was, what else are they going to do to knock down this door and get back to the Super Bowl? And then what did they do? They drafted their quarterback of the future, Ty Simpson. And we all saw it. No matter what the Rams say, it seemed like Sean McVay wasn't exactly thrilled. He came out and gave an explanation for why he was looking so glum after they made that pick. Who knows what the real reason was, but I can imagine he was sitting there thinking, I'm not worried about 3 years from now. I'm worried about right now. Let's go and get a piece that can help us win the Super Bowl right now. So it seemed like the Rams were back into, well, we don't want to go quite all in. We want to hedge our bets and maybe start thinking about the future. But it turned out they've been trying to make this trade for Myles Garrett for a while. And in case there was any doubt, they are absolutely 100% all in on this season and getting back to the Super Bowl. And right now on paper, they absolutely should be the Super Bowl favorites. Doesn't mean it will happen. You need a lot of luck, a lot of things bouncing your way. Need to stay healthy. But if you were a betting man, you'd have to say the Rams with the reigning MVP in Matthew Stafford and the best defensive player in football, they've got the best shot at getting to Super Bowl 61. Now, you don't need to be a football expert to understand that Myles Garrett is good. So I'm not going to insult your intelligence. You know he's a game wrecker. He's the most dynamic pass rusher in the game. His combination of speed, power, bend, moves, use of his hands, everything you need as a pass rusher, he is one of one in the league right now. He broke the NFL sack record while playing for a bad Browns team that rarely held the lead late in games, which meant he didn't have as many opportunities as other pass rushers did to pin his ears back, knowing that the offense is one-dimensional, knowing that the offense has to catch up, they have to throw every down. He didn't have many opportunities like that, and he still broke the record. On top of that, he's one of the most chipped, double-team defenders. And you can go check out my breakdown on footballfilmroom.com. He has a lot of sacks where he's fighting through double teams, just going through the gauntlet and getting to the quarterback quickly. But aside from his talent, I think the biggest thing to point out about Garrett is what he does to opposing teams, what he does to their game plans. Protections have to be aware of him at all times. Quarterbacks have to be aware of him at all times. Very often, teams have to keep in a tight end or a running back, or they have to chip, and that reduces the amount of receivers who can go out into routes. And that makes the secondary's job easier. That makes the entire coverage scheme's job easier in terms of defending route concepts. So that's one area where he's impactful. The other area is, of course, the offensive line, the protection. Myles Garrett is lined up outside over the left tackle. You can leave your left tackle on an island, but you do so at your own risk. Most teams are going to end up sliding his way, having their guard be a little bit more aware of him than any other defender in the area. And if you aren't just doing a conventional four-man rush, as a defense, you can use that to your advantage. Knowing that Myles Garrett is to one side of the protection, you can anticipate that they're going to slide his way and then bring blitzes from the other side. So Garrett isn't just going to be a game wrecker on his own in terms of his ability to get to the quarterback. He's going to open things up for the rest of the Rams' defensive line. and for the rest of the Rams pass rush. And Chris Shula, defensive coordinator, he already does a lot with this scheme. He's a very diverse defensive coordinator in terms of what he throws at an offense. The combination of coverage, blitz, personnel, etc. The Rams last year were number 1 in stunt percentage and number 5 in simulated pressure percentage. So they didn't send more than 4 very often, but the way that they sent 4 was not via the traditional 4-man rush. But he does a lot of imaginative things. Popping on the Rams tape every single week is always fun. Looking at that all 22, seeing how Shula decided to deploy his defense. And we'll see how he plays this. Who knows if he dials it back and says, hey, I've got Myles Garrett. Let's not take a risk on, stunting out of a running lane or giving the quarterback an escape lane. Let's not run the risk of simulated pressure and somebody missing an assignment and dropping a guy into coverage who's probably better as a pass rusher. Maybe they just say, hey, we're going to play a little more straightforward, go with a 4-man rush, keep everything in front of us, and make the offense drive the length of the field, knowing that, hey, eventually they're going to make a mistake. Eventually Myles Garrett's going to get to somebody and force them into a 2nd and long, 3rd and long situation. Or perhaps he's going to use Garrett to his advantage and throw intricate blitzes to the other side of the defensive line, knowing that the offense is going to be giving Garrett extra attention. So they're going to have a ton of options, and you pair that with the fact that he's also going to have a lot more options than he did a year ago in his secondary because of the presence of McDuffie and Jalen Watson. And this Rams defense, they're going to be like a chameleon, or they're going to have the ability anyway to be like a chameleon. They can adjust to any opponent, week to week, situation to situation, and they're going to have a lot of different ways on defense to shut down the opponent. And that's an important thing because the Rams last year, look, they of course had talent, and Jared Verse was a really good pass rusher. He's a really good young player. But a little bit of what made the Rams successful on defense was the fact that they used smoke and mirrors to a certain extent. And they leaned on the offense to do its thing every single week. Eventually, a team like the Seahawks that saw them 3 times last year, they were able to figure them out. They really broke through at the end of that second game when they had that comeback win in Seattle on a Thursday night. And then the NFC Championship game, Sam Darnold picked them apart. So scheme, smoke and mirrors, that can only get you so far. To win a championship, at some point, it can't just be about the X's and O's. It's got to be about the Jimmies and the Joes, the players on the field. They need to be able to make plays, and this is true on both sides of the ball, when the other team kind of knows what's coming. But as I said, the Rams now have talent out the you-know-what. They've got good scheme, so I don't think the talent's going to be held back by poor scheme, obviously. What a lot of people, I think, aren't focusing that much on is that Garrett is a really good run defender as well. He's an upgrade over Verse in that area, and that was another place where the Rams' defense did struggle. That was one of the soft spots of their team. That's where offenses could attack, could have some consistent success. So he helps them everywhere. And here's the last part of all this. The way teams beat the Rams last year, the way the Seahawks beat them, was by standing toe-to-toe with them offensively and throwing haymakers. No one went into a game against the Rams and Matthew Stafford and Sean McVay and that offense and said, we need to hold them to 10 or 14 points and win a low-scoring game. That just wasn't in the cards. When you play the Rams, you've got to hope to contain them, maybe keep them in the 21 to 24, 27-point range, and then your offense has to do their job. Well, that approach of trying to beat the Rams by out-dueling them offensively, that just got a lot harder. Because I don't know how many teams are going to be looking forward to the prospect of throwing on down after down with Myles Garrett pinning his ears back and getting after the quarterback. And Garrett, like I said, he hasn't really had that opportunity throughout most of his career. He hasn't been on teams that have taken early leads and made offenses one-dimensional for a large portion of the game. He hasn't had that chance. And he still set the NFL record for sacks last year. So just as a football fan, I'm not a Rams fan, I'm excited to see what this looks like because we've seen franchises try to put together super teams in the past, and they've fallen flat on their face. This doesn't appear to be that type of thing. This doesn't appear to be that type of organization from the coach and Sean McVay to the quarterback and Matthew Stafford, where expectations are just going to be so ridiculous and sky high, and the team's not going to be able to meet them. I'm not saying they definitely will go to the Super Bowl, but this has the making of a super team that is going to be able to live up to the hype. And the interesting thing is they look so good that Aaron Donald, arguably the best interior D lineman of all time, he wants to make a comeback. Now, I don't know if this is going to happen. I don't know if I want this to happen. I mean, sure, as a football fan, I want to see Aaron Donald paired up with Myles Garrett. I think that would be unbelievable. but I doubt we're going to get the same Aaron Donald that we all know and love. He's 35? He's been out of the game for a couple of years. I have no doubt in my mind that he's in shape. Right? I think there have been some videos posted on social media showing him still working out, still being somewhat of a beast. But there's a difference between working out and training for football. And so I don't think you can count on him playing such a physically demanding position like defensive tackle and still being that dominant force. Still being able to lean on offensive linemen and overpower them and win with quickness. I mean, there are not that many examples of players coming back after taking some time off from the NFL and being the same type of players physically. Just off the top of my head, you could think about Le'Veon Bell taking a year off to hold out, then going back and playing for the Jets. And I know it was the Jets, so maybe that has something to do with it, but he was never the same after he took a year off from football. Rob Gronkowski, he took a year off from the Patriots and then came back to play for the Buccaneers after losing a ton of weight. He tried to put it all back on, and he could still move. He just wasn't the same player physically in terms of overpowering players and being able to block quite as well. So that's what I would expect from Aaron Donald. He might come back. He might be just as quick as ever. It's that strength and explosiveness that I'd be more concerned about. But if he wants to, and I'm the Rams, I'm saying, yeah, you're absolutely climb on board. Aaron Donald, come on back. Because what if you are close to the Aaron Donald we all saw a couple years ago? What if you can still give us some really good snaps, 50% of the time? What if you're part of rotation now instead of on the field every single down? I could see that being the situation that Donald comes back to. But we'll see. We'll see. Either way, unless you're a Seahawks fan or a 49ers fan, you can't really root against that happening, can you? I mean, is the NFL ever worse off when a all-time great player comes out of retirement and tries to make a comeback? Did anyone suffer last year when Phillip Rivers came back after 5 years? No, it was extremely interesting to see. So I hope it happens, but I guess we'll just have to wait and see. The other big trade that happened this week, A.J. Brown going from the Eagles to the Patriots. Again, we all knew this was going to happen. This had been talked about for a while. A.J. Brown clearly wanted out of Philly. Philly clearly wanted to move on from Brown. Mike Vrabel was the head coach who drafted A.J. Brown. Brown grew up in the NFL with Vrabel as his coach, I guess you could say. They had some good success in Tennessee. They made it to the AFC Championship game in 2019. Shocked a lot of people. And I know he said that he loved playing for Vrabel. So off the field, that seemed like a match made in heaven, certainly from a coach-player relationship standpoint. Now, on the field, Brown obviously makes the Patriots a lot better. Last season, he had a bit of a down year. That was due to, I don't know if you would say he necessarily lost a step. I'm not sure I would go that far. I think it had more to do with the circumstances, the offense that the Eagles ran, the quarterback he played with. He did have some uncharacteristic drops and moments, but he is still every bit a go-to, bona fide number one receiver. And that's the type of player that the Patriots really didn't have last year. Stephon Diggs had a good year. Some of their young receivers came on. Mac Hollins had a good season, but they didn't have a guy like A.J. Brown who you can line up outside the numbers, and anytime you see him in a one-on-one, you get him the ball. Because that's the type of player he still is. He's physical, has really good hands, will pluck the ball out of the air, can win at the line of scrimmage. Doesn't necessarily create a ton of separation when you look at all the next-gen metrics and all that. But you know when he's in a one-on-one matchup, he's going to run a good route. He's going to get a good release off the line. Can consistently make those back shoulder catches. Really good at tracking the ball. He's been arguably, over the last 5 years or so, the best receiver against man coverage, against one-on-one coverage. Really has been. And so Drake May now has that type of receiver. And the difference between May and Jalen Hurts is that May is a much more proficient thrower, much more accurate thrower. And I think you'll be able to see him take more advantage of having a receiver like A.J. Brown than Jalen Hurts did. And not to mention Josh McDaniels. McDaniels knows how to deploy his receivers. Even though A.J. Brown is sort of your prototypical outside-the-numbers receiver, you can move him around. You can line him up in the slot. He can run in-breaking routes. And so you pair him with Romeo Doubs, Hunter Henry, their run game. The Patriots' offense is going to be just fine. Drake May, I anticipate him bouncing back from what was a very rough postseason. But for the Patriots, this is your second year in the system with Josh McDaniels. This will be Drake May's second full season as a starter. Offensive line should be better than it was at the end of the season, with Will Campbell playing on that injured knee. The Patriots on paper are a better team than they were last year when they reached the Super Bowl. Now, as I was saying earlier, to get to the Super Bowl, to win a championship, you need a lot of things to go your way. You need a lot of fortunate breaks. You need to stay healthy. I would say the Patriots, certainly when it came to being fortunate last year, they got a lot of breaks. And so this year they're going to have a more difficult schedule. The rest of the AFC isn't really taking the year off like most of them did last season. I'm joking, Patriots fans. I'm joking. But the Patriots very well could be a much better team this year and have a worse record, not go as far. And I guess that's not a huge shock because they made it to the Super Bowl last year. It's tough to expect them to return 1 year later. But between what they can do on the defensive side of the ball, the scheme that Vrabel brings, the way that you know they're going to be a tough football team, that's the type of football team that Mike Vrabel always has. They're going to be able to match up that scheme and that toughness with an offense that can actually be more explosive than it was a year ago. So Patriots aren't going anywhere. And I think A.J. Brown being in the AFC East is just a really interesting thing. That competition between the Patriots and the Bills, that's going to be fun to watch. That's going to be great to watch. I do hope we get to see this year the Chiefs returning to be a really good team, the Ravens being a really good team, the Bills being better than last year. And you throw the Patriots in the mix there, and I think it's going to be a really interesting AFC this season. All right. I want to get into Cam Ward now, merely because I did a breakdown on him recently, put it up at footballfilmroom.com, spent the last 3 weeks or so going through every single one of his games. And just to let you all know, if you weren't already aware, he is a supremely talented quarterback. He is very physically gifted. You could probably guess that with him being the number 1 overall pick if you hadn't watched him closely. But his ability to throw with power from all different platforms, all different arm angles, without his feet underneath him, he really does have some rare ability. He's up there in terms of being one of the most talented quarterbacks in the NFL. And the comparisons that Patrick Mahomes get thrown around a lot, especially if you're a quarterback who can throw from different angles and you run around and scramble and make second reaction plays like he does. But I think the comparison is apt here because he has a similar style in terms of being able to break the pocket, having really good vision downfield, being really, really patient. I mean, he'll get all the way to the sideline and almost slow play it, almost look like he's walking or crawling to the sideline, giving his receivers time to break open. And then he can throw from all sorts of unbalanced positions. And that's not just my feeling comparing him to Patrick Mahomes. Again, that's a lofty comparison. I'm not saying he's going to be Mahomes. I'm talking merely stylistically and just what he brings in terms of physical talent. But you heard other players around the NFL say the same thing. Chase Young, defensive end for the Saints, after he played against Ward in Week 17 last year, in his post-game press conference, he said the same thing. He said he's got a little bit of a Patrick Mahomes feel to him. Those were his words. Now, physical talent doesn't mean a whole hell of a lot in the NFL if you can't do all the other little things. And that's one of the issues with Cam Ward. He struggled last season in terms of his mechanics. You sort of knew that was going to be an issue because he does throw from so many unbalanced positions. The problem is he does that when he doesn't really need to. He throws without his feet under him when he has a clean pocket. And while it's nice to have that ability, because in the NFL you can't always have a pristine pocket, you're not like a pitcher in baseball where you can replicate your mechanics exactly every single time, you have to try as best as you can to replicate your mechanics when you've got a clean pocket. That's what's going to lead to consistent accuracy. That's what's going to lead to consistent ball placement. And Ward just really didn't show that, particularly early in the season. And that led to him missing some throws, missing some big plays that he should have had. But I think another issue with Ward was that he still has that playmaker gene in him, and that's too much of his game as a quarterback right now, which isn't to be unexpected. If you're a player who has that ability and you're able to get away with that in college against, let's just say, inferior talent to the NFL, you're not just going to get to the NFL and suddenly start playing another way. So Ward would get in trouble last season by breaking the pocket early, breaking out of the structure of the play too early, looking to run around and try to make something happen. It's a nice ability to have. Like I said, in today's NFL, you have to be able to make plays outside of structure. It just has to come as a last resort. Now, the good news for the Titans is that Ward did a lot better as the season went on. He did actually improve in the second half of the season, and that's very encouraging for a couple of reasons. One, it shows that he's able to make progress. He's able to self-correct. He's able to either take to coaching or evaluate in himself, hey, this isn't working. I need to make a bit of a change. But the other reason that's encouraging is because he was in a terrible situation for developing last year. His head coach got fired after 6 games. He had no receiver who caught more than 48 passes. No wide receiver. The running game ranked 30th in the NFL. The Titans were 30th in pressure percentage allowed. So he didn't have a lot of help around him. Didn't have a great situation. And he still managed to improve as the year went on. First half of the year, he was completing something like 57% of his passes, 5 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. And then the second half, he turned it around. Started completing more than 60% of his passes, 10 touchdowns, 1 interception. More importantly, he looked under control, a little bit more under control. I don't want to tell you he looked like Peyton Manning or anything, but he looked a little bit more under control in the pocket, played with a bit better timing, was looking to get the ball out of his hands a little bit more when he hit his back foot. Saw him just get more comfortable too, had better ball placement. So it wasn't just throwing with more accuracy and his feet under him a little bit more, but was also putting the ball in the right place relative to the coverage, meaning he was seeing the field a bit better. You saw a few snaps where he tried to manipulate or move defenders, which again, that's a sign of being comfortable and understanding what the coverage is and who's in the area. Saw him work through a few progressions here and there. Saw him complete a few more passes with a little bit more touch. I don't want to say he looked like Jaden Daniels the year before or anything, but he showed some glimpses. He showed you that it's all in there. And probably most importantly, he got sacked 38 times in the first half of the season, only got sacked 17 times in the second half of the season. So it basically cut his sacks in half, and that's one of those things that's hotly debated over who's more at fault on a quarterback sack. Is it the quarterback or is it the offensive line? Very often it's a combination of the two, but at the end of the day, the quarterback has the ball in his hand. He has to be able to find a way to get rid of the ball or make sure he's seeing a blitz, seeing where the free rusher might be coming from, anticipating where pressure's coming from so that you don't take a negative play. So for those that do believe sacks are more on the quarterback, he did a great job in the second half of the season of cutting back there. So the question with Ward now becomes, obviously, what's year 2 and beyond going to look like? New coaching staff, new regime, some new talent around him. He's going to receive a lot of help from Carnell Tate, wide receiver the Titans took with the 4th overall pick out of Ohio State. We can argue all day long on whether or not he should have been drafted that high. The fact of the matter is, he's a good receiver. He's going to be on the roster with Cam Ward. He's going to be on the field with him. He is going to help him because he is a very good route runner. He's a reliable receiver. He plucks everything out of the air. Titans also brought in Wan'Dale Robinson. They're hoping Calvin Ridley can stay healthy this year. And those 3 receivers as a combination, when you're in 11 personnel, that's a decent grouping. Might not be the best grouping in the NFL, but that's more than enough for Ward to work with. And it's more than enough to say that it's a huge upgrade over what he had last year. But the biggest question I have is, how will Ward develop under Robert Saleh? Now, I know Saleh isn't a quarterback whisperer, doesn't pretend to be a quarterback whisperer. He's a defensive head coach. But culture matters, and developing in a defensive culture versus an offensive culture as a quarterback is very, very different. And Robert Saleh, in his first tenure as head coach, I know it was with the New York Jets. I know that organization makes it difficult for you to succeed as a head coach. But he did not do a very good job of creating an environment where a young, talented quarterback could develop and thrive. Because Zach Wilson was a very similar quarterback to Cam Ward in terms of high draft pick. He was selected 2nd overall in the 2021 draft, Saleh's first year. Very physically gifted throwing the ball, very athletic. Talent was not a question with him, and he seemed to get worse and worse every single time he stepped on the field. And maybe it's too much to place all this blame at the foot of Saleh, but I'm just giving you my perception of the way things looked from the outside. It seemed like an environment where it was okay to finger point. And those fingers were pointed at the young quarterback who needed to develop, needed confidence. I know that sounds so snowflakey and all that, but it's true in sports. You need to find ways to make your players more confident if they are not already confident. And the way Zach Wilson looked, just so unsure every single week of what he was doing, and increasingly unsure every time he stepped on the field, it just seemed a little bit like, well, it's a defensive head coach, a defense first team, quarterback, make sure you're not screwing things up for us, get the hell out of the way, because my defense is doing all right. My defense is doing just fine. If only we had a quarterback, if only we had something a little bit better on the other side, my defense would be able to lead us to the championship. That's just what it seemed like. And it seemed like there was no issue with players kind of taking shots at Zach Wilson during post-game press conferences. When he finally was benched, I don't know if you remember, the entire team or the entire offense was wearing these Mike White T-shirts. Mike White was the backup quarterback who took over for Wilson. They're wearing these T-shirts celebrating the guy, almost as if to say, finally. But if you're Saleh, you can't let that happen. You can't bench your quarterback and then have all your team wearing T-shirts of the new quarterback the very next week or 2 weeks later, whatever it was. Again, that speaks to a culture of finger-pointing and not a great place for a young, developing quarterback to be. You know, every team goes through lulls where one aspect of the team isn't working, and you can't have the rest of the team feeling and expressing, oh, hey, man, if only they would do their job, we'd be a lot better. The championship teams throughout history, they pick up the slack for the areas of their team that are struggling. Go back and watch any documentary or read any book on the Green Bay Packers in the late 60s, or the Chiefs in 1969, the year they lost Len Dawson for a large stretch of the season and had to actually play with a third-string quarterback at one point. Their defense felt the need to just pick up the slack. They weren't complaining that the offense wasn't doing their job. I'll point out, like I do very often, Tom Brady during that 2001 Patriots season, he threw 3 touchdown passes and 6 interceptions in his final 8 games that year. Patriots went 8-0 in those games. You probably didn't know that because no one was sitting there blaming Brady for not putting up big numbers. They were winning games. So the bottom line is culture matters. Who your head coach is matters. What he wants to do at the end of the half when there are 2 minutes left. Does he want to sit on the ball because he's a defensive-minded coach, or does he want to go for it because he's an offensive-minded coach? That matters. And all that matters in the development of a quarterback, of course. So with Saleh, it remains to be seen. I know he's a respected coach around the NFL. I always thought he would get another opportunity as a head coach. I didn't think it would come this quickly after the Jets debacle, but maybe he's learned his lesson. And I think you can say there are signs that he has learned his lesson. He brought in a guy like Brian Daboll, who, quite frankly, has been a really good developer of talented young quarterbacks. Just look at what he did with Josh Allen, of course, from 2018 to 2021. Turned a completely raw, athletic, arguably the most physically gifted quarterback in the NFL into somebody who plays the game with a lot of precision now, even though he doesn't get the credit for it. In 2022, his first season with the Giants, he kind of revitalized Daniel Jones' career, helped him turn things around, at least for that one season. Wheels sort of fell off in 2023 and 24 due to injuries and issues with the Giants roster, but that's neither here nor there. He obviously was able to get something out of Jones in that first season. And then last year with Jackson Dart, another young quarterback, obviously same draft class as Cam Ward. His first 7 games, which were all the games he played under Daboll before he got fired, Jackson Dart looked pretty damn good. And that was without his number 1 receiver, Malik Neighbors, for 6.5 of those games. So he's going to be able to get the most out of Cam Ward. And if you were to make a list of coaches who can get the most out of talented young quarterbacks, Daboll would be up there in the top 5. So Saleh made a good decision by bringing him in. That's a good sign, I think, if you're the Titans, that maybe he learned a thing or two from his time with the Jets. But again, I still think that remains to be seen. We're going to see how having that defensive-minded head coach, how that's going to affect the development of Cam Ward. But the one thing I will say is that Saleh is a very good defensive coach. His defenses always seem to fly around the field wherever he goes, gets the most out of his pass rush. He's known for being somewhat of a linebacker whisperer. So it wouldn't be a surprise to see the Titans turn things around on the defensive side of the ball pretty quickly. And if that happens, and Daboll can get the most out of Cam Ward, that AFC South, man, it always has surprises. You had the Jaguars last year. Would anyone be shocked if the Titans kind of came out of nowhere and had a similar type of season that Liam Cohn and Trevor Lawrence did? Not going to predict it, but that AFC South always has some surprises for us. That's it for today's show. Thank you all for listening. As always, if you like this podcast, please be sure to like and subscribe on Apple, iTunes, Spotify, Substack. We're over on YouTube now. Be sure to check out footballfilmroom.com for our All-22 breakdowns. Well, I think that's all I've got for you today, and I'll talk to you next time.